Welcome to a new episode of DevSecOps Talks with me, Matthias.
Andrei
and Mark.
Hey!
We managed.
Almost do it better than Paulina. Paulina is also good at this, but yeah, we train. It's the hardest part in IT, right? Naming things and say your name at the right time, right?
People who listen to this,
look for the eye
I feel sorry for you. I feel sorry for people who listen to this every episode.
We're getting better, right? We're getting better. So let's see if the episodes come out in the right order. But Mark was with us last time. We talked about some development AI, but that's not really where Mark shines, right? That's a fun name, by the way. It's in Kubernetes and why everybody should run it. And Ollie doesn't agree. He's like, why would he bother with that?
I'm here just to listen. You're paying.
Don't worry, I'll trigger you any moment. Don't worry about it.
But can we? I mean, it was a long time ago when I ran Kubernetes, and it happens. I think a lot of things. How long have Kubernetes been around? Like 10 years? Could be long.
Just about. I think it was like around the mid 2015 was like their first soft, and then they went from there. Yeah. So I think we're closer to 10th birthday for sure.
And we see shitload of posts with people complaining like, why should you run Kubernetes? Why? And it's taking so much time and energy. But also I think it's in the last year something happens with how you deploy your Kubernetes cluster. And in the beginning, you barely have to run it on EC2s, right, on Amazon, and then you get K8s, and then you started fiddling with that, and then after some time, then we're getting better and better tools to actually run the cluster, right? Yeah. Mark, how do you see on the evolution of the boxes of manage or like running the Kubernetes cluster?
Yeah, like if we look at the journey, right, like Kubernetes came out with the concept at the very start of having all the bells and whistles kind of out of the box was the original concept. But then as the years went on, they realized, well, this was a mistake. We're now committed to this thing, but we're the orchestration engine. These are just plugins. Let's start removing them. And so I was at the CNCF meetup in the Kubernetes meetup in London, and I met some of the actual authors that are contributing directly to the Kubernetes and are leading the architect of it. And one of the ones that they stood out and said to me was, it's like their main thing is they want to strip down the Kubernetes to be a skeleton of what it needs to be. And then when you need that security module, that dashboard, you bring those tools in yourself. But if you don't want that, it should be as lightweight as possible. And I believe that's definitely the right direction that tool needs to take, because like the complexity level just grows tremendously. And that's the pain that you speak about earlier. It's the how fast can the complexity grow, right? Like in my opinion, Kubernetes is easy and hard at the same time, depending on what you choose. Like if you choose a very basic setup of Kubernetes, it's very straightforward. But then when you start adding in things like CRDs and custom add-ons, then that's when it starts blowing up, because it's no longer a Kubernetes tool. It is your load balancer tool combined with Kubernetes mindset, So it's very, people kind of paint it as one brush, but it really isn't, right? And that's what we're seeing Kubernetes moving towards. So I think if we look towards the kind of a more broader picture of where the journey has gone, we've seen that Kubernetes came out there back in 2015. They've gone through a great journey so far. We start seeing some really good distros coming out then shortly after. Like, for example, we give credit towards Rancher, who released the K8s and RKE. And that became so easy to just throw that onto a Raspberry Pi or something like that. And now you have anyone being able to have a Kubernetes literally as a device for $100 at home, right? And that's exactly why I have at home, sitting on my computer desk. And it's a lot of fun. But of course, that wouldn't be possible, right? Because Kubernetes by itself requires like 4 gigs of memory to just as a baseline, just to run with a dual core. And it's like, try to do that on a Raspberry Pi. That is not happening. So I'm seeing a really great adoption from like developers, like being able to use tools like Kind, for example. You can run a multi-cluster setup on your local laptop with one machine and simulate high availability. You have Minikube, Microcube, and every cube you can kind of think of. So I think the bridge between trying to get the knowledge of what it is and designing these systems to be universal towards developers and being able to get it from local dev, which is your local laptop, into dev through production and feeling that everything is the same is the key part. But that's the problem, right?
Yeah, that's the problem. I see, I run a lot of Minikube, right? That's my go-to when I develop, right? And I also develop into Kubernetes with what's it called? Shuffles? When you develop, instead of when you save your code, it's deployed to your Minikube so you can test it directly. When you're building operator, you're trying to do this. It's like, it's hard to get out.
Yeah.
But what I realized is like, it's kind of easy to deploy something to the cluster. It's easy to deploy like a Nginx web page and a database, and you get your like ingress. It's really simple. It's like, what can it be, like a couple of YAML files, and you can get them generated. It's like a Docker Compose.
Yeah.
But then when you move it into a larger organization, you need more stuff, right? And now it's getting more complicated. Like, now it turns out that your database, or like you have 3 replicas of your web server, they were running on the same nodes. When that node went down, they all went down. You had 3, but they were not spread out. And you're getting to more and more complicated stuff when you move from the local dev into the production, and I see that as issue.
And that's definitely a big issue, right? Because like just focusing on that pain point you made is like, well, we want local dev to be as easy as possible for developers. We don't want them to spend weeks trying to figure out how to do high availability. And of course, then when they go to production, we don't have them configuring high availability. So it's a double-edged sword in itself.
Yeah. But it's also, it happens. I mean, now you bring up K8s, right, from Rancher, but you still have to install your Ubuntu server or something, and then install it on top, right? Rancher from the beginning was kind of simple. You just added Rancher, and then you can add nodes. And for example, now I'm running Talos, which is super simple, bare metal, Kubernetes only. It can do 2 things: master a node, super simple to run, super simple to upgrade, super simple to upgrade Kubernetes on as well. It just does it. And I didn't have that a couple of years ago. I run Flatcar. And when you run Flatcar, and what was the name from that? Well, you PXE boot to get a Kubernetes cluster. The problem was that the certs were valid for 1 year, because in their approach, it's like, you have to upgrade your cluster within 6 months, because that's the lifetime.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's still a problem today.
PXE booting, new servers, and then provisioning. They said, no, you need 2 clusters, right?
Yeah.
And 2 clusters in production on bare metal, that's a lot of servers, right?
Yeah. It's a lot of buffer space.
Yeah, it's a lot of buffer space. So it was a lot harder some times ago. Now it's a little bit easier.
Yeah. So I think on that point, like you look towards, like I think that's where the cloud providers have done pretty well. Like you have the EKS with Amazon, you have the Google's Kubernetes servers as well. So everything we just spoke about, right, is like out of the box. You don't have to deal with that. But of course, anything comes with a cost, right? Instead of me spending the 2 hours I need to fix that per year, now I'm getting this. I don't have to deal with that anymore, but I am paying between 15 to 20 times more for the same infrastructure, right? And of course, that includes the manpower you would have done otherwise, right? So it's not just going to count CPU and RAM. Of course, the manpower is what you're saving on, but at certain scale, does that really work for your business? And that's kind of the borderline. Do I want to deal with these maintenance things? I just need to, like the world of DevOps and DevSecOps is, well, we'll automate it first, right? So once we've automated it, then we're moving forward. So like while we say like, okay, we started with Kubernetes this month, we have a lot of like manual tasks, like as you say, rotating certificates, updating services, rotating the nodes themselves. Like there is a bit of work there, but again, those things can be automated with like tools like GitLab and GitHub, using tools like Terraform and Ansible. Like these are the tools we're all familiar with, and they come quite far. Like one of the communities out there is KubeSpray by the Kubernetes community, which is an Ansible project in whole, and it is a very impressive project. Like the level down to like everything that you have mentioned as problems, they actually have that built into their roles and optimizations that you can just go to GitHub now, download them, and gain 2 years of optimization straight away. It's very powerful.
Yeah, so it's been a lot easier to maintain and run it. But so, I mean, there are different layers you can run your workload. You can have like bare metal, and you install your service by yourself, and you run your Kubernetes cluster. Of course, you have to have a lot of knowledge to do that, not just on Kubernetes, but also on disk, on network, blah, 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 all that stuff you know. The other part, as I said, is the K8s or GCP, GKA cluster. They also have pre-made like Kubernetes cluster that you can get. You get the baseline, you get storage, you get network, and you get integration to the cloud providers as well, right? But then you have to pay extra for that. And then there's a third. And what is that, Andre? It's
managed services, native managed services.
And then you just pick up your workload and shoot it over to
and
ECS.
then like all the time that's free up, you can spend that, to learn dancing, spend time with your family, and if nothing of that rocks your boat, you can maybe think about building actual products that you're going to sell and earn money.
Yeah, and that is definitely the dream. I'm not sure if I'm fully bought in on it. And the reason why I of course, like, just to make this very obvious to the readers, I'm definitely going to play the devil advocate towards Kubernetes for sure here. And it just comes down to I've been in the hot seat for too long in my career. Is the best words to use, right? So the dream is, and this is usually where developers start, where I'll just put it on the machine. I'll just put Docker on it, or I'll just use Docker Compose or something on those lines. And then when they get to a certain stage of growth where they're kind of like, and of course, like, that's the caveat, just not to go past that point, is it's about the growth. You shouldn't be planning for when you're about to be an enterprise in 4 years' time from now. You need to face the challenges you face today. So I definitely am not an advocate that everyone should be on Kubernetes. You need to pick what's best for you. But for me, I have found, like, obviously I've been out for so long, so de facto is Kubernetes is easy, but nevertheless, like, pushing out on that dedicated server can work really well. But then when you're spending more time dealing with config drifts, when you're dealing with things like, oh, we're planning capacity management, we have to do migrations of this, we need to figure out to make sure that our load balancers goes to the other servers while we shut down this server and scale it up. And of course, like, if you use Amazon, you know that Amazon can send you out that dreaded email saying you have 30 days to stop and start your instance so they can move it to a new server. And then that becomes an ordeal as well. And with EKS, that's just done for you automatically, right? And the managed services. So it's about picking your battles. Where do you want to go? If you're looking to move fast now for the next 6 months and you haven't got much Kubernetes experience and you haven't been there before, like, I would probably recommend not going there, right? If you're looking towards like removing vendor lock-in, right? Like, it's very, if you go towards ECS and you stay with your typical tools there, it will work really well. But then when you start integrating with the S3 solutions, with their secret management, with a bunch of their services, now you're vendor locking yourself in further and further, which makes sense because you would create a VM.
Kubernetes doesn't give you, it's a lie. That you choose Kubernetes and you avoid vendor lock. That's a lie.
So every single service that is provided by the cloud providers are open source tools, and all those tools can be installed on Kubernetes yourself. But you are right, there is the underlining tech debit, right? You can't just like, oh, I'm just going to bring in this mini IO and all these other tools and we're all going to be happy and dandy. It's like, no, you can bring it in and then you're going to spend the next month or two really learning it. Because
it's all this hybrid cloud debate. What you do is, like, you say, like, fine, I hybrid cloud, so I'm gonna limit myself to the basic cloud primitives available to me so I can move all the time. But then, like, yes, you can do that, but then you're wasting a lot of time. So what you get from the managed services and a lock-in is the fact that you can actually go much faster with much smaller team, and you can push all that, like, AWS shared responsibility model. You can push all of that responsibility to AWS and you will pay less comparing to hiring the team. Obviously, at some point, you will get to the multi-billion enterprise level where you have unlimited resources where you can pay for a couple of teams doing the platform engineering and all of that fancy stuff and maintaining Kubernetes cluster. Yeah, sure. But if you are small to mid enterprise, all this vendor lock doesn't make sense at all.
But you always you become vendor lock when you start using their like services, like if you're using K8s and using IAM roles to get access to your vault, right? Of course, that is going to be. But I mean, your deployment that you run will not be vendor lock. Your application would be in a YAML, and that would be available to run.
But your application still needs to have like a role and credentials and everything. You have EKS, and what EKS is basically Kubernetes somewhat wrapped. I don't know how well it's integrated, how deep integration is on other hyperscalers, but with EKS, you basically have somewhat vanilla-like Kubernetes wrapped in the AWS stuff. And what you need to do is you basically need to configure your networking. So you need to bring your own CNI so it works well with AWS. Then you need to build a bridge so you can map the identities from Kubernetes to AWS IAM. And I mean, like, you have to do quite a bit of work to actually integrate that yourself. And that kind of pays that lock-in. You will not have those primitives in another cloud.
But I think if you go on-prem, you don't have those things, and you don't work with them, right? That's the feature. Instead of using Vault to storage the secret in S3 or using key manager, you have it locally and using service account in Kubernetes instead, right? So you have to go full.
And that's exactly it. So, sorry to interrupt. I'm so excited about this part, right? Because that's exactly where Ankra is all about, is making that easier. And that's the pain, right? Like you really hit on it, Andre, that like if you go on-prem with Kubernetes, what do you face, right? So if we look towards Hertzner, for example, they provide amazing servers, top-notch. They have a ridiculous amount of... I actually was just on their page there yesterday. I was looking at their data centers, and just in Germany alone, they have 16 data centers and 21 in Finland. Like, Amazon doesn't have those availability servers, to the high availability zones like that. And it's very impressive. And down to the level of, like, for example, if I want to set up a cluster of servers with my own hypervisor, with the best part of maybe 90 core CPUs or more, around a terabyte of RAM and so on, that costs about $500 per month with Hertzner, right? If we bring that same hardware spec to the cloud providers, that same bill now is going to be 20 times more, which is the part where when you're small, that's fine. But when you're larger, that becomes one of the pain points, right? Is the cost difference
between
the two.
Unfair comparison. Like, it's like
the truth, though. Look at the CPU
you are not comparing apples to apples. You're comparing apples to pineapples or whatever. Because on Hetzner, you're getting the raw hardware. On AWS, you're getting EC2, you're getting VM, and you're getting a bunch of managed services on top of that. Like, for instance,
I didn't include managed services in this. I just include ECS, in my calculation.
No. Like, what I'm saying is, like, you're paying more because you're getting more out of it. So, like, for instance, you have a workload running on EC2. Like, we compare, like, you buy the VM or whatever, or a server on Hetzner, you buy a compute unit in Amazon. If you compare CPU to CPU, RAM to RAM, disk to disk, that will be more expensive on AWS, but you have to ask yourself why. Because you're getting more on top of that. So, for instance, you can get CloudTrail for free, and everything that's going on with that service, like this instance, calling other APIs, getting automatically logged. You can get logs out of it and everything, and all of that you don't have on Hetzner. On Hetzner, you're getting like bare metal hardware, like the plain hardware. You don't get anything on top. You have to set everything up on top of it. And then you take all the hours you spend to set it up. Like, multiply it by money, you pay that person to set it up.
I'm just going to interrupt, right? Because there's a lot of fact checking that needs to be put in here, right? Across the board. So, yes, AWS does provide a free tier to get started. So trail logs is there, but as soon as you go into the area of outside of that free trial, the expense becomes probably too high for the SMBs that we're talking about that are going to benefit from it, right? Like, if you look towards Reddit, for example, like I seen one there that their WAF, right, compared to Cloudflare. Like, Cloudflare does their WAF for about $200 per month on that lines. And for the exact same capacity with Amazon, it starts around $2,000, right? And they're two great providers by far. And then you go towards the trail logs. I haven't heard too much about the trail logs with Amazon too much. I only know the Datadog scenario, which I guess we've all heard the horror stories of, where a company has integrated in, the logs go in, and in that 1 month when exceptions go crazy, now their bill is a couple of $1,000 from $100 the month before. And that's the scary part, where it's like when you go into the other tiers, then it grows really fast. If I was to bring this back a little bit towards Hertzner, like you're dead right there. When you talk about the dedicated servers from Hertzner, then you get to the point where, okay, I need to manage my own hypervisor. So there is an extra layer of complexity. But at the same time, Hertzner also has Hertzner Cloud, right? And the CPU to RAM usage is quite strong. And they have a lot of the services in place for logging, for load balancing. The VMs are on demand and so on, and you pay on an hourly basis. So they are really starting to compete in the same area. And again, this comes back to, well, how can you benefit from this? Companies who are in Amazon are not going to benefit from this massively because you're going to have to invest in that on-prem setup anyways, right? So when we talk about Kubernetes for on-prem, what does that look like? So you've hit on a few of them already, Andrea, which was the networking. You bring your network, you configure it, but sadly, you have to bring even more of the foundation. So for example, if you have if you're a Hertzner, for example, they do have an integration called the Hertzner CSI driver with Kubernetes, and that basically connects their storage solution directly to your dedicated server on Kubernetes setup, and you get storage. So storage is the first one. The next one would be the load balancer. So you can use Ingress Nginx, of course, and then you can connect that to their load balancer, so you don't have to deal with setting up VMs and dealing with those load balancers. So and then we all are familiar with other type of tools like Cert Manager to get our certs out there, and a few others.
Yeah, so I run a lot of heads now. Like I run cloud, I run prem as well, or like the bare metal. I even connected like bare metal into cloud, right? And of course a lot of AWS. And I mean, you pay less on Hetzner, but you don't get that much, right? You get the network layer is very basic, right? They don't even have like a NOT gateway. You have to set up your own gateways to get traffic out, right? So it's very basic. In Amazon, you get a lot more. Like the question is also like, do you need it, right? You pay, of course, a lot less. You pay more here. And so, I mean, you have to balance that to see like, where do you want to spend your money, right? That's the key, right?
Exactly. And that's the hard thing about this conversation. We're probably never going to see eye to eye because it's going to be very specific to the pains that we have seen, right? And so for me, for example, like so I've been dealing with a lot with Hertzner, with OVH and Scaleways, or the three that are doing really well here in Europe in this arena. And when you really get down to the nuts and cranny, like technology, like we deployed out really great applications 15 years ago, right? 20 years ago before the cloud. And we did pretty well. The biggest pain back then was when I needed to scale to a new rack, it took months to a year to get the hardware and stuff like that. That was at least for me, that was the pain back when we were saying, oh, let's move to the cloud because now we can be more flexible. This year, things aren't going so great. We can scale down instantly. Next year, we're booming. We scale up and don't have to talk about planning employees, planning hardware, and so on. Yeah. And to the point, right? Like if you're a small company, that's like the cloud is perfect, right? Because you want that flexibility. But then when you're moving more towards like compliance or even markets, right? Like I know there's countries here in Europe and there's municipalities here in Sweden who have it that you must have a Swedish provider for if you want to provide a service to our municipality, and that's the same towards like even Germany, right? Like the regulations that they have for their banks and stuff like over there. If you just want to be a service provider for them in any way, you have to meet this high standard. And in a lot of cases, can cloud meet that need? It's questionable, and that's not because they're not capable of doing it. It's political, right? And that's more so I think the need for agnosticness. So I think like a good example would be like, so I've dealt with PCI DSS at a period of time. And while you could argue that like a high level of optimization wouldn't be required for a small business of a team of 10 people, we were also credit card compliant, which is like, it's kind of peculiar. And there was only 2 of us doing it. And one of the rules for PCI DSS is the person who develops is not allowed to deploy. And the person who deploys to dev is not allowed to deploy to prod. because there's too much interknowledge of knowing how the system is vulnerable is the concept. And so for us, it's like, well, we're only 2 people. So if one of us are sick, we're really in trouble, you know?
Yeah.
And that's where we went to the levels like, okay, let's try automate this as much as possible. And then one of the requirements, which we've seen now with DORA compliance that came out here in Europe in January, was that financial critical systems have to be agnostic to the cloud in general. If one cloud provider goes offline, you should not go offline, right? And we're going to see probably some interesting things in the coming weeks when we hear about the cloud providers that have been hit. Like Cloudflare went down like, what was it, 2 weeks ago or something like that, or last week. And we, in Sweden here, we actually saw our financial system go down for half the day. And it's like, okay, but you guys have failed to be compliant. And the only way that you could actually have protected yourself from this would have been to have that 2 architect kind of separation that is needed. So I think, like, depending on where things are going, when we talk about convenience, then as we mentioned, the EC2, the VM, it works well. And as my needs grow, I can use their trails or use their serverless approach or whatever my need is. But then when you get down to the geopoliticals and compliances and trying to do business in that arena, that's where the complexity really blows up.
I think that's interesting. I've done PCI compliance on both on-prem and AWS, right? It was easy on AWS.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, like AWS responding to that build, opening up the sovereign cloud in Europe.
Yeah.
So just say, well, Germany wanna have like here's your partition.
But they're gonna get But it's an interesting part, man. And some of the things I can say, like I'm running a lot of Kubernetes. I have it like as a default one. So when I build stuff, I always build it for that and deploy it to a cluster, right? Mm-hmm. And that's because I get a lot more things out of the box. It's there. I don't have to use it, but it's there. Like I deploy my application. If I want metrics, I can get metrics really quick. I just deploy the metrics provider, right? I get metrics.
Yeah.
If I need logs, I just deploy the log collector. I get the logs, right? I don't have it on my local stuff, right? But the ability to just add your deployment, your app, and then run it in the cluster, and then it works, makes that. I mean, I know that I can scale it to as big as I want, right? It doesn't really matter. The hardest part, I think, with it is just to get the application in there, right?
Yeah, there's a few hoops involved, right? Like when we take, if we talk through the flow, and I'm going to use my preferred option, which is Helm, which I'll use part of the flow thought is pretty much. For me, it's always like you have your local dev, you got the application running. Now you're happy with it. It's performing well, looks good. Now it's like, okay, let's put it into Docker. So now you've Dockerized it, we've done the build, and we push it up to the registry. So the next step is from there, okay, now I want to get that image on my Kubernetes cluster. And so for me, obviously the easiest option would be build your pod manifest, right? One manifest file, and you can deploy it there, and then you have it.
But you see, it's still a lot of steps. For example, Vercel is push it, right? Push the Git. Yeah, it's deployed.
So that's what developers want. They don't want to have all that fancy dancing.
It's just waiting for these things, and then it's added. Yeah,
that's like I think it breaks. What I do about it? Like what do I do about it? It's broke. There is something telling me, but I have no idea what that is. Like no one wants to deal with that.
I think it's a really good point, right? Because developers and engineers, right? Like when you talk in an organization, at least on outside of the tech team, they're the same people, but they have very different roles in the organization. And at least for me, I think I said this last time, and I'm going to say it again, you can be great at one sport or good at many, but you could probably not be great at many. And that comes down to developers are the specialists in their fields. They know what's great. They are constantly tracking their own performances and they're laser focused. That's how you get the best developer performance in my opinion. But then engineers, they're a bit more reactive, a bit more spread, and a bit more on the higher level, looking at, okay, well, the application's coming in here. It's going to need these things. How do we do reliability? Yeah. How do we automate these tasks so there's never human error? And that's their focus. They're completely different worlds. And I think that's where Kubernetes at least try bridge the ground, right? Like if you talk like setting up a three-tier architect, right? A very classic term. You have your load balancer, you have your main application, and you have your database as the main setup. And the if we look towards those things, it's like, okay, well, I need storage. So someone needs to assign me the storage unit. I need to partition it, and it goes through rigmaroles. Same with the load balancer. Oh, I need to drop my config block in the middle of this big, huge config file. Did I break something by mistake with the Nginx or HA proxy and those type of things? And it's like, how do you give that knowledge to everyone? It's a bit too complex. So Kubernetes came in with the concept, how do we rationalize this into one language, being YAML? And I know it's not the answer, right? Like the YAML they brought out, I think they're doing KYAML now, which is like you can do comments within the YAML, which is a nice move forward. But it's still complicated, right? It still doesn't solve like the underlying knowledge. But I think the key point that they've done is they tried to abstract it where general developers should be able to move. But then when it becomes niche, specific outage or misconfiguration, then the YAML is not going to help you, right? You need to have a good foundation to build upon. So I think that's where they tried to divide the responsibility, which I think is one of its powers. And that's kind of like, for me, one of the issues, right? Like I've been in an organization where they have done deployments manually, literally SCP their application out. And by doing that's so, nice. Like it works. Like it's very straightforward, no pipelines to run, stuff like that. But the problem comes down to, it always comes back to config drift, the management. Like that's what's nice about having the optimization. You have your pipeline running, and as soon as it sees something misconfigured, it's going to push it back to what's meant to be configured. And that is super powerful, because when you get to the point of local dev, development, and production, we definitely never want to hear, it works on my machine.
Yeah, but you also bring up another, I would bring up something else, like you talk about developers. I don't think the developer would pick the service they run it on, right? It's going to be the DevOps or the platform, or those people are going to pick where they want to run their stuff, right? And then they're going to be comfortable with troubleshooting and deploying and adding service to that one. I mean, OpenShift's been around longer than Kubernetes. And in the beginning, they had like a repo, just pushed your code to that repo, they kind of built it and deployed it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But nothing happened, right? I mean, there's probably still companies running OpenShift, but then moved over to Kubernetes, and it's like, it's getting lower because it was a nightmare running. I mean, you try to start something, and then you have to like, where is that command you have to flag out so I can have root access here? Like, so I think
and
also
so on that point, just to give a little bit of context, OpenShift has actually moved into the world of Kubernetes as well. So now the OpenShift platform is click deploy, I get Kubernetes, which is a nice part. But the key problem that we're kind of hitting on, that we're kind of sidestepping, is the problem is not really the Kubernetes. The problem is what you put into the Kubernetes. Like if you go to GCP or any of those providers, they provide you a good Kubernetes, but if any of your services you install, like for example your security tool or anything like that, it's not their problem, it's your problem. So it's a managed Kubernetes cluster, but it's literally what it says on the tin. It's managing the box that you're in, not what's in the box. So I think at least how I see it at the moment is like we're currently, like if we look at the industry today, we're seeing that a lot of people are moving towards the hypercloud, because like nobody wants downtime, nobody wants to be like, obviously nobody wants downtime. But are you talking about
multi-cloud like GCP or AWS, or like on-prem? And
I have a small point here. So all the talk about people moving to multi-cloud, I mean, people cannot even freakingly build their software to run in multiple regions on one cloud. And now they're like, we're going to go multi-cloud, and that's going to solve our reliability problem. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Maybe probably not in the cloud, but in your software and how you run it.
Yeah.
And like going
and how are you going to fail
it's
over?
Like, it's like the runner. I'm a runner. That's the typical problem with runners. Like, I wanna run fast. I'm gonna get the better shoes. I'm not gonna do any physical exercises that I need. Like no flexibility, no other stuff that's required to run fast. I'm gonna get the better shoes.
But that's the problem.
Like another line. Yeah,
that's the problem. People are lazy. People just buy new shoes, right? They're lazy. They don't
solve all our reliability issues, because clouds go down.
We get a new cloud.
Now we have two clouds. We have two problems, because like we cannot manage our software.
They're not going to be compatible. That's
where are you going to put your switch between the clouds? In a third cloud.
Yeah.
Now you have like a 3-piece problem. You had like one-piece problems that you can optimize and fix and actually run it nicely.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's like such a piece of
You're
BS.
dead right. There is a dream, right? That's human. One thing we're great at is definitely dreaming, right? And we see that across the industries. And I think you're dead right on this point. Like when we talk about multi-cloud, irrelevant if it's on-prem or another cloud provider, it does bring the double complexity to some extent. And when we talk about, oh, this is going to protect my business from being down, it's like, it's not going to protect it from being completely down. It's just going to protect you from being down for the full day type of scenario, right? And that's what we saw, right?
If you build your software properly, if you have a proper disaster recovery scenario that you test to switch between clouds, and no one does that.
I don't know why. Is that in some compliance? No, it's not right.
It is now in compliance. So from January, the EU brought out the DORA compliance. And while we all know the DORA metric has nothing to do with the DORA metric, and pretty much that brought out that I think it's mainly fintech currently. So it's critical infrastructure has to be compliant, and they have to be able to fail over any point between the cloud providers. And it's in the compliance that they have to prove it annually. So they actually have to do the failover to the new cloud provider as part of it as well, which makes total sense because we all know, look, we had that disaster recovery playbook. Let me just dust it off a little bit. You know, like we know it doesn't work. So I definitely see like, I would love to see the lack of dependency on one cloud provider. Like as we see right now, like we have the three major ones from the US being the Azure, GCP, and AWS, but we're really not seeing that growth within our own ecosystem of Europe, for example, which I think is a little bit of a shame. And I think it comes from two aspects, which is a lack of proper funding in comparison to the US, which like this is a money game when you're talking about this level of hardware and skill set you need. I think the other part about it is that maybe we're like, I don't want to bash the Americans, they're definitely fantastic people over there, but I think the level of skill sets that we have here in Europe are quite high. So we don't depend as much on the cloud services as much, because a lot of companies I talk to, I hear them dealing on these low levels of data centers. Like we have a tremendous amount of data centers for the continent that we really hold. So it's quite an interesting challenge for sure. And then I think the third point that I was trying to hit on earlier was in the current industry right now, like financial is a tough thing right now. It's all about company profits lines. And so if you're arguing between like as you put it, Andre, you definitely don't want to be hiring full-time employees, but at a certain stage, depending on how big your setup is, it might start coming into play where you can start reducing some costs if you did have the full-time employee.
I'm telling you, like, look, all the companies who've been loud about them migrating from the cloud and going on-prem, like recently, like Dropbox, for instance, right? Oh, we left AWS, we're saving so much on S3. You know where they go? They go on-prem to die because no one gives a crap. Like if your company priority is saving money, there is a problem in your company because, like, look, your cloud bill, no one gives a damn if your company profits are growing all the time. Like if you're growing, no one cares. Like I've been working like with many startups, and they start to care about their cloud bill when the times get tough. Like when they're not growing, or like they need to save money to save their runaway for the next rise and all. It's pretty much the same with all the companies. They start to care about the cost when the business starts to stagnate. So if you care about saving millions by going on-prem, you're going there to die because your business is irrelevant.
Yeah,
that's like my statement.
I understand. I totally agree with the statement to an extent. I think the part is we can't ignore the economy, right? Like the economy is a global thing, not a technology thing, right? Like if you look towards the US, I seen this interesting report that came out from the US Senate that they said that 40% of their entire stock growth this year comes down to 7 companies, and they're all IT AI companies, which is a scary thing for any economy to ever say. And so that actually just indicates that their general economy, if you're not in AI, you're actually in a shrinking business. So to some level, it's like a soft recession in itself that we're talking about here. And so I don't think any company is immune to that perspective, no matter how much potential you have, because it really comes down to being able to withstand the hard times, and then when they're not hard times, be able to put the pedal to the metal, right? And I think that's the only way that you can have a formula for success, because every company has to go through that. If you don't have the resilience, you're going to crash, right? And that's exactly what you're saying, but from using private data centers as an option. So yeah, I definitely see I see your point, but at least right now, I feel at least this year and last year, this has been the focus for businesses. It has been that it's literally focused on not potential, not towards like ideology, unless you're in AI. It is literally what is your MMR, what is your ARR, what is your annual profit margins. And if you're not having, like, even if you look towards like Facebook, and they even did it here for Lovable here in Sweden, is what is your employee profit margin? How much does each employee bring in as a profit on an average and stuff like that? When you start talking on those levels of metrics, if that is what everyone is so fixated on, then we're in that scenario, as you say. This is the time when companies will die. This is the time when resilience will matter. And being able to
say, like any sane business, like look at their balance sheet and kind of count the money they bring in. Because if they don't, I'm not really sure what they're doing there as a business. Because like that's the essence of every business, to make money, so you can pay your employees, so they can go and play in Kubernetes and other games. You know, that's how it works. You need to make money so you can hire people and grow your business. You hire people so you grow the business. Like you don't hire the people to do something they like to be doing,
but
right?
Isn't it that you can have like use the skill? I mean, you can use the skill of the people to different things, right? If you have a company, you have skilled personnel that can run the Kubernetes cluster, that would be preferred for the company, right? They will do that. But if you're a startup and you just have developers, then you have to bring in that company, you need to train them, and then you need to do a lot of stuff. Then you can chunk it over to somebody else, and they will take care of it. You can do Vercel, or it doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah.
So it comes down to what kind of...
It will come time where you will run into limitations of the platform you have chosen, and then you will need to pivot, but then it might never happen because your business might die.
If you're in that problem, if you come to a problem, you still have money, so then you can scale it. But it like people knowledge, right? And
so I think it's two parts. So people knowledge is definitely one. I think the other one as well is competitiveness on your offering for pricing, right? So if your cloud bill is X amount and your employee salary is X amount, then you need to be saying that you're making more profit than you're spending, right? And this is where the number comes down. If I'm going to beat my competitors without making a loss, this is starting to see, it's like, okay, well, if I do single node tenancy on a dedicated server and I have employees who are seniors, very confident, been in the industry for 15 years, while this is not their focus, they can definitely get us there. Like that is definitely a strategy that can work for organizations if that is where you're battling.
Okay.
And then I think the point on your people is a good one as well.
Okay. One last question for you, Mark. So be ready for the future, right? Say that I'm going on-prem, right? Mm-hmm. You have one class on-prem, I have one on K8s, right? And a new type of database comes up, right? It will probably be deployed to, say, I can't remember the one on GCP when you can have it's a new type of like AI coming out. It will probably be quickly, fast available in AWS. You can build agents really quick now in AWS, and you can have them running in your. It's much harder if you run on-prem, which means that you can, and if your competitor then is running in AWS, you can lose the margin here, right? You can lose like new features coming out, now technology, and you're stuck behind here, right? So you need to think about that as well.
So there is also
the boat you're rowing today, right? It's gonna last the full.
No, there is a thing that people like we haven't mentioned, but you can have DIY hybrid cloud. Where is it going with HashiStack, for instance? They kind of all about multi-cloud. Like you can try to roll your Kubernetes multi-cloud thing. But also every cloud provider, they kind of hear what the customer want, and they offer them to have hybrid cloud-ish solution where they would host your control plane, and then you can count with your own data plane. So just an example, because like I'm an AWS guy and like I know what's there, I cannot give you example from other hyperscalers. But you can take either ECS or EKS. Like for instance, you can take ECS. They have offer like ECS anywhere. So if the compute cost is your concern, then you can go and rent your servers from OVH or Hetzner or whoever, or like your basement, and then you just run the ECS agent there. It will pull the images, will schedule them there, and they will report to the mothership. So you can kind of having the cloud, but you also having your own servers, but then you are responsible for all the hardware failures, for all the storage failures, for the networking outages, all the security breaches that happen there, all the security safeguards that you need to have, that because now you have a physical security that you need to implement. So, but it's like bringing in a little bit of on-prem pains. But they actually
it's moving over now, you see? Andre is moving over. It's like, wow, you can actually run on-prem here.
No, you can, but like you will have pain. And like, I usually go from the business perspective, right? So like you are in a business of making money. So you need to focus on what is it you're offering people and not necessarily how you do that. Because I would argue it might not matter. And I do agree with Matthias, it actually will boil down to the skills of the team you have. So if they know Kubernetes, everything looks like a nail, you're going to get Kubernetes all over the place. And well, you would have to live with that. But you will choose Kubernetes not because you're choosing Kubernetes, but just because your team knows Kubernetes. I mean, like no one in a sane mind says like, I'm going to do the business, but I definitely need this piece of technology to like orchestration technology to do that. It doesn't matter from the big picture of the business, what you do there.
Yeah, I think in general you're correct. The only one that I would add that I slightly disagree on the point is when you want to go hire someone, right? Like if you take that as a perspective, would be like we went through in the optimization world, we had Chef before Ansible, right? And Chef was it was an interesting solution.
You don't use that word.
I know. I'm definitely setting listeners' hairs on their neck.
In Spanish, they have this word horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I would definitely relate that to this tool. But I think the thing that killed off the tool wasn't because there was problems and these pains, because it was definitely complex. It was that nobody wanted to learn it anymore. So if you had Chef in Prem, try finding an engineer that knew it. And she's like, okay, well, we can hire a smart engineer and hope that they like it and want to really learn it and not just do the bare minimal. And so I think people, as we mentioned, people's skill set of your employees is a key factor in either direction. But you really need to weigh what is the technical debt the business taken on, and can we hire people in that area, right, is a very key factor. But I also want to go back to Matt's question is, how do we future-proof for on-prem? Because I definitely had an idea on it, which was, so like before we had the clouds as well, there was a great company that I'd say most people have heard of called Equinix, right? And Equinix success is not because they provide great data centers, right? It was because they provided a fiber optic interconnectivity that it was greater than any provider out on the provider. So if you put your dedicated server into Equinix, you had private fiber lines to Google, to the banks, to whoever it is, and that cut down on latency, increased security, and things like that. And the great thing now is that this has become more widespread. And again, I was just looking at the Hetzner data centers for this exact reason, is that if you have your servers, be it the Hetzner cloud or the Hetzner on-prem, they actually have direct lease lines into GCP in Germany that you can connect with. So you can go into GCP, order a connection between Hetzner and your GCP account, and now you can have your dedicated server now has full access to all GCP services. And I actually looked, AWS and Azure are all interconnected as well. So I think this is probably the future of things, where we're going to see this like private, what's it called, black fiber, for example, where they're all interconnected, and then you'll just pick and choose between them. And the reason why I really love this concept as an approach is that currently, if you're in AWS and you have no option out, you're using all their services, they can put any price to you and you just have to sit there and smile. If you're in a position where you can move between clouds, like I know there's the cost there, but then you gain negotiation power with the cloud providers. Currently, it's a one-side direction discussion. And that's a problem in the industry, I believe, because if we look towards like AWS, GCP and stuff like that, like if you look at their price increases in the past 3 years alone, I think year on year, we're around 11% on services, and it's just like, is that justified? Maybe not. Can I say anything about it? Not really. So I think it's kind of a hostage.
Agreement. You do a corporate agreement and be done with it. So
yeah. When you don't have power, it's difficult.
I think we all agree here at some points, and we are up at 50 minutes. So
that was a long one.
It was a long one, but it got heated as well. That was funny, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a hard one because it's all about perspective, right? It's about what pain you're facing, what skills you have, and what can you do with your toolbox, right?
It's your life choices, I would say. Like, for instance, in my world, everything that you described just doesn't exist. Like, all that on-prem doesn't exist in my world.
Yeah.
Because I'm choosing the customers I work with.
You have a server in the closet at home, no? Or...
No, I see a customer passing by saying we're doing on-prem. I'm saying you do not exist. I don't work with you. Bye-bye.
Fair.
Okay, I'm gonna press end here. Thanks. Any last words or? No, I'm gonna press no now. End now when everybody agrees on the hybrid scale. Bye.
Absolutely.
You have been listened to DevSecOps Talks with Matthias, Andre, and Paulina. For notes and information, please visit devsecops.fm. Thanks for tuning in.